Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to call the University Senate to order. Today, we start with something very happy concerning the Vicki R. Courtney Award for Outstanding Service to University Senate Governance. I'd like to call on Professor Rachna Shah to present this item. Rachna?
Thank you, President Gable. It is my great pleasure to announce the winners of the award. First, a little background on what the award is about. The Governance Award was renamed in 2021 in honor of Vicki Courtney, longtime director of University Senate Office, for her leadership, her commitment to collaboration, and her enduring contributions to shared governance. The award recognizes faculty, academic, professional, and administrative staff, civil service staff, and students system-wide who have made a significant impact on University Senate governance. This year, please join me in recognizing the 2022 recipients. Missy Juliet, finance professional to College of Liberal Arts, and Amy Pettinger, professor and head, Department of Pharmaceutical Care and Health Systems, College of Pharmacy. On behalf of the Award Selection Committee, congratulations and thank you for all your contributions to both the winners. I think both are here if they wanted to say a word or two. I'd invite Professor Pettinger if she wants to say something.
Only to thank my nominators and to say what an honor it is to receive this award. Thank you.
And Missy?
I also would like to thank my nominators, and I am very proud to serve the university and very honored to receive this award. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Back to you, President Gable.
Thank you both, and to everyone else nominated. There are so many wonderful people doing service, but it is a great pleasure to kick off this award with Missy and Amy. So thank you both for all that you do. Okay, item 3 is a motion to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. A 2/3 majority of those present and voting is required to approve the special rule. Is there any discussion? Okay, Chris, if you could initiate the poll, please.
All right, we'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 117 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 abstention, that motion prevails.
Thank you. All right, our next item, item 4, concerns administrative responses to University Senate actions and is presented for information. There are no administrative responses to University Senate at this time. Item 5 is a list of recent faculty and student deaths that have been forwarded for announcement to the Senate. I invite you to observe a moment of silence while I read these names. Mark DeRosers, Kenneth Doyle, Georgia Dunleavy, Tina Faulkner, Deanna Mills, and Beverly Schmidt. Okay, item 6 is approval of minutes from the University Senate meeting on March 31st, 2022. Chris, if you could please initiate the poll on the approval of the minutes.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 112 ayes, 0 nays, and 15 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 7 is the president's report. So I'll just launch right in for everybody as the semester winds down, which is hard to believe. I want to express appreciation, of course, for everything that everyone is doing, and in particular to this group for your work in governance. We've actually accomplished quite a bit. There's a lot to look back on over the ups and downs of this past year and the twists and graceful pivots that we've had to make over the last year. And I think we have operated in a representative and collaborative way with structure and transparency, not perfection, but with lots of really positive outcomes, both in terms of the decisions that we've made and in the way that we've made them. And I'm really grateful for that. I think we all know that many of our colleagues across the country do not have similar experiences, especially over these unprecedented times we've been in. And so I am very grateful for the work that we do together. It's been a lot, but we have adapted remarkably. And there have been unexpected points of pride. And I've been starting to say both to myself and to everyone who has the dubious distinction of listening to me that I think we're at the point where it's important for us to start to recognize our accomplishments. I don't think we need to diminish or are diminishing the fact that many people have suffered substantially over these past couple of years, that many inequities and disparities have been exposed, but at the same time, we have accomplished a lot. And I think we can and should feel pride in those accomplishments while we continue to address the concerns that we have. We also have done quite well around our safety, particularly with regard to the pandemic, of course. In terms of classroom transmissions, there still are no outbreaks or surges in any of the classrooms. Our case rates are well below the surrounding communities. They have been all along. We have a tremendously vaccinated community. We have been very rule oriented. And I know that not everyone agrees with every decision we've made along the way and how we've addressed the pandemic. And that there are those who would have us address safety in different ways, some much more stringently, some much less stringently. We have had a very consistent methodology in relying on national and state guidance and the expertise of local subject matter experts, our own data and trends. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. And I know that that meant that many of you lived in a perpetual state of something ranging from frustration to anxiety or whatever emotion you were feeling. It is legitimate and acknowledged. And yet here we are and we've progressed. And so I'm grateful for all of that as well. We're turning a corner, we hope. We really hope this time. And that helps us in terms of the function and operation of the institution. It helps us begin the financial recovery as much as we hear about the really rapid changes in the economy. We are still digging out from the shortfall from COVID, but it gives us great optimism about the pacing around that recovery and what that can mean in terms of recognizing the way in which this economy is affecting you individually, what is fair in terms of compensation, and also allows us to steward the resources of the institution responsibly, which we obviously must do. I think as we emerge, we are optimistic about the future and confident about the way things are going, as long as we're able to continue to function the way in which we have been. So a couple of specific things that I want to call to your attention. This year, we launched PRISM, which is the President's Initiative on Student Mental Health. It is a faceted approach to the student mental health crisis around services and the availability of those services, allyship, and how faculty and staff can be allies to students, clear communication so that students in crisis don't have to dig through a bureaucracy in order to find the resources that they need, and then support for underlying research and into improving treatment. We're making presentation about this to the Board of Regents in June, with the PRISM leadership taking the lead on that presentation. And in May, we'll be recognizing and acknowledging, and while this word may not be the most appropriate, celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month to continue our collective efforts. There's still a lot of work to do, but there's a lot underway, and it's part of the reason why we feel this optimism. In February, the Board of Regents approved a new namings and renamings policy. That was a slow, steady journey. with a lot of consultation, a lot of people on this Zoom call giving really substantive and helpful feedback, and now continuing to do so in the form of service on the All University Honors Committee, which is responsible for the next step in the operationalization of criteria and methods, and their work is underway. I have encouraged them to feel that they should do the work at the pace that they feel is appropriate for the complexity and novelty of this work. So we should be hearing from them soon, but not on any particular set or preset deadline. Similarly, MSAFE made its presentation to the Board of Regents a couple of meetings ago. Unbelievable shared contribution to the transition between the external review that we did and then the ongoing sustainable work that we want to do around safety and policing, some of which is underway, some of which will continue through the Campus Safety Committee, some of which goes directly to Chief Clark or to the chief in Duluth or Morris, or in partnership with the agencies that our other campuses work with. It's a layered approach. We're working slowly and steadily through it, arguably not as fast as I know many of us would like, myself included, but it is complicated work with a lot of stakeholder and constituency involvement. And so we're working through it accordingly. Some examples: we have equipped UMPD with body cameras. We have incorporated and hired a full-time social worker into the Department of Public Safety. We have community liaisons now within the Department of Public Safety. We have adopted the Rave Guardian app, received some really helpful feedback on that recently that we're working on. It is very important for us to address safety, upticks in crime, and also to address the need for safety to be inclusive and for everyone to feel safe in every way in which we or they would define that word. So it's a process. I don't know that there's an end to it, but there's certainly a shift in how we address it, and we'll be providing a formal report in response to MSAFE soon. I will add that there is an outstanding Senate resolution on demilitarization that is longer overdue than my office is accustomed to being in responding to resolutions. Those of you who are directly involved, I'm sure, have noticed. And with our apologies, but also with our explanation that we've held that response because demilitarization is part of the MSAFE review and we want to do everything together in a context. So we will be providing the response to that resolution as we provide the formal response to MSAFE. And so all of that is in the works and is coming. Related on the inclusion front, a few months ago, Vice President Michael Goh engaged Cambridge Hill consultants to help us better understand what we're doing around DEI in terms of what's working and where we may need to shift, where we have gaps and where we have strengths that we should invest in. This is all tied to both the transition in that office and to the strategic plan commitment for goals. So they are mapping and analyzing the scope of our DEI efforts. This builds across the inventory that I've reported to you about, but it is system-wide and three-dimensional. Inventories give you a list. This type of analysis gives us dimensionality as to the things on that list and how they intersect and how they work. That also includes a gap analysis around strengths, opportunities for growth and improvement, and then also programmatic intersections so that we can make sure that the things that we do centrally, the things we do across the system, the things that are at the unit level, some of our individual work creates something where the outcome is greater than the sum of its parts and creates a real palpable feeling of the work that we're doing around inclusion rather than a series of one-offs, which is, I think, we are better than that, but I think there's room for improvement, and that's what they're helping us identify. The consultants have visited all system campuses. They've met with faculty, students, staff, different administrative leaders, and they've also been benchmarking at other institutions. And so we're looking forward to receiving their recommendations, which are anticipated next month, and we'll bring a report forward to you so that when we start to take action, and also as we start to onboard a new vice president for equity and diversity, that we can be very transparent and collaborative about how that process will work. You're going to hear later from our legislative liaisons, but I'll make a quick report on the legislative session. We're in the last 5 weeks of the session. This is when everything starts to happen, and it's dizzying the way the pace picks up. Very busy for all of us who are involved in this. Great appreciation to those of you who do this work. There are decisions coming any day around how different budgets will intersect. As you know, we have a very I called it bold. Others use different adjectives of our supplemental budget request with a series of projects involved in that request. It is hard to know how that will be reviewed. I mean, we know that the initial proposals are not what we asked for, which is not altogether unusual or surprising, but there's still a lot of distance between where we are now and where things will ultimately end up. And so we're working very hard to make sure that as much as we can see resourced, that we have the resources available. So more on that as time unfolds, and of course, more detail on that from our liaisons when they make their report in a few minutes. And then our senior leader searches are underway. As I'm sure you've seen from the announcements, we're searching for Vice President for Equity and Diversity, Vice President for Research, and for our Duluth Chancellor. All of these searches are in full swing. Finalists for the VPR were this week. Equity and diversity is over the next few days. You'll start to see those announcements. Same with Duluth. And I encourage you to be involved and provide feedback. We absolutely read every single piece of feedback. I get a table of it. I pore over it. It's very helpful in identifying how we best serve the community and how to ensure that those who join our team and enter the community anew or in a new role are set up for the best chance for success in the role in which they're undertaking. So please provide your feedback. I would be very grateful for it. So just as a conclusion, thanks again for everything you've done this semester. A real heartfelt congratulations to our students who are graduating. It's hard to imagine what the totality of your college experience has been like. I mean, as many of you know, my youngest is still in college, and I know from that point of view how challenging it's been. And so I know many of you, especially as you lean into governance and the extra work that requires, it's been a lot. And we're grateful, and the quality of your work absolutely shows. So we're cheering for you, and I'm glad that we can have commencement in essentially a normal way this spring and feel good about that. So I'm glad we can celebrate in that way. So with that, I'm going to take your questions, and I'll start with the pre-submitted questions. I have a group of questions from Professor Tetsuya Yamada, and I'll start with that. The first question from Professor Yamada is, the university 712 document currently uses the language of he or she. Is it possible to consider changing it to the candidates to accommodate and support non-binary people? So there has been some progress on this. The faculty tenure policy has removed gendered language. Some 712 statements have not yet done so. And so that's at the departmental level where there's still gendered language. So that would happen as each department goes through its regular cycle of review on how their policy regarding statements, but the university language has been changed. And over time, it should all change, and we will continue to encourage departments to attend to that change along with others that represent inclusive language. The next question is, does the university have any policy on receiving any donation from family members of a faculty member, particularly during the promotion and tenure process? So the promotion and tenure process is totally separate from what happens with the foundation, which is a separate 501c3, separate nonprofit, and all donations go there. So there's no report or detail that is received by those who review promotion and tenure cases around if a family makes a donation. We do have policies on accepting gifts and conflict of interest, and we of course have federal guidelines and compliance, but there's no intersection between financial support from families and the P&T process. And then the last question from Professor Yamada, does the university invest in fossil fuels? So this, we've had a lot of engagement with student advocacy around this, and faculty and staff advocacy too, but students have had formal advocacy around this. We stopped making new investments in any public fund that focused on fossil fuels back in 2014. We're currently in a wind down process that is estimated to take 5 to 7 years. This timeline is driven by the fact that many of our investments are in funds, and those fund managers control the pace by which the divestment happens. We are also, though, as we steadily divest, also investing in what are called ESG funds that focus on sustainability and ethics and good governance, and making sure we make affirmative investments in green or clean businesses so that we are balanced ultimately in favor of the power of our wallet supporting sustainability. As the divestment happens, we are investing in the positive way faster. As of June of 2021, which we check this annually, all of our public equity exposure and index funds was transferred into what's called ESG aware or low carbon funds. So it's a process. The answer is not a yes, there's some investment, but with the intentionality of eventually divesting over an appropriate period of time while concurrently investing positively. So with that, I will take questions from the floor. Chris, if you want to call on people in the order they raise their hands.
Sure. The first question is from Emily McGuire.
Emily, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Emily. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the school public health student senator. Thanks so much for meeting with us. My question is more school public health specific, but I figured I would use my role as university senator to bring it up. So myself and 2 other students wrote your office, the Board of Regents, and the Office of Student Health Benefits about a insurance concern that we have. And over 100 students at the School of Public Health signed on. We have yet to receive any response from your office or really from anyone addressing our concern outside of the School of Public Health. And so I was curious if 1, you're aware, or 2, if you plan on responding to our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I'd have to go and look because I'm aware that we've received a few different correspondences around insurance or the fees for insurance. So I don't want to say I'm specifically aware of yours without going back and making sure I know which one is which. But if it is a individual response, we respond. When we receive templated responses that come in on a bot, we don't respond. So I want to make sure it didn't look that way to the server. But we'll go back and double check. And yes, if it's a letter from you, then you will get a response. Absolutely. Next question, Chris.
The next in line is Scott Petty.
Scott, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Scott Petty. I'm the graduate student senator from CFANS. This will be my last university senate meeting. So my last question. What would be the administrative burden of having central admin screen through offer letters for incoming graduate assistants with appointments to basically screen us for eligibility for programs for the working poor and help us enroll in things like food stamps and programs like that? And who would be the optimal person to run that? OHR, the grad school, student affairs. For those of us who are working 20 hours a week to meet food stamp eligibility, but are being paid, below the extreme low income threshold in the state of Minnesota.
That's a good question. It's a very interesting question. I don't know. The administrative burden would vary because, of course, offers for the types of programs that you're describing are distributed. There isn't a central entity that makes the offer. And so I'm not sure, and of course, I'm responding on the fly, so everyone should take this as a draft answer. I'm not sure if it's better to think of it as a screen or more as an inserted language or preparing an FAQ and having every letter direct students to that, as opposed to a screen, given the way that offers of admission are undertaken. But the idea of identifying the availability of resources and clearly communicating those would be a combination of the grad school and the colleges that admit grad students into their program. And one could argue there's no reason to limit this to grad students. This could apply to all students. And it's a very interesting question. So I would ask your indulgence that we take a look at what it would take to have clearer communication, what we already do, which I'm not, don't have at my fingertips, and what we could do to enhance communication awareness and support for students who would be eligible for resources. Okay, next question, please, Chris.
The next question is from Carter Yost.
Carter.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Carter.
Perfect. Hi, President Gable. This is in regards to a comment you just made about the power of the university's wallet to support sustainability efforts on campus. On Tuesday, March 29th, the Minnesota House Higher Education Committee held a hearing on House File 4539, which would establish a green training program for training employees at the university on regards to sustainability efforts and meeting those goals. This legislation was strongly supported by labor organizations and unions and progressive student groups on campus. And an article in the MN Daily from late February of this year highlighted how university workers and service staff have been struggling to meet sustainability goals due to a lack of training or a lack of financial resources or resources writ large on campus. However, the university administration sent a letter to the House Higher Education Committee opposing the legislation. So my question is twofold. Firstly, could you explain why the university opposes the green training program and its attached funding for sustainability efforts on campus, and particularly why it opposes mutual management of the green training program with collective bargaining groups on campus? And secondly, as the legislative language has been included in the higher education omnibus bill for this year, alongside $1.5 million specifically allocated for the green training program, which will be voted on next week, does the university maintain its opposition to the proposal and to that funding?
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Carter. So when we make our legislative asks around what we seek from the state for funding, there's a very specific consultative process that we use and ultimately seek board approval. We only ask for, at the end of the day, what the board has approved. And if it isn't part of what we worked with the board to approve, then we generally oppose. And in this case, this is not what we came forward with as a publicly voted package for support from the legislature. And so, as we would with anything else that falls outside of those parameters, with very few exceptions, we oppose it. If this is the law of the state, we will absolutely follow it. And even if it isn't, there are probably things we could compromise on in order to close this gap. But the opposition is related to the way in which this came up through the budget, as opposed to the content of the legislation itself.
Yeah, that's helpful clarification. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Carter.
Of course.
Next question.
Yeah, it looks like we have two hands left. Next is Christopher Stallard.
Christopher, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Christopher Stallard. I use pronouns like he, him, and his, and I'm the CSE student senator. My question for you is, I know there's going to be a lot of discussion in the upcoming year about student wages and increasing that. My question to you is, do you also have plans to look at loopholes in the current student wage system? My example for this will be certain departments will require volunteer periods before paying undergrads to work in their labs or the like. Would you also look into eliminating loopholes like that when you go to look at increasing the student wage?
Thank you, Christopher. That's I did not know that. And so we are, as you all know, we have a whole work group looking at undergraduate student wages. We are doing review on grad stipends and fees. And I know we'll talk about that in more detail later today. The idea of that specific loophole is, or that specific scenario, as you describe, is new to me. And how that ties in, I'd have to check. There are things that I would need more information. And so what I would say is that if you all as senators have examples like that one that you have concerns about, this would be a great time for you in whatever way you would prefer, formally or informally, to make us aware of as much as you know, knowing that new things always come to light, so that we can have this all reviewed at the same time, because we don't know what we don't know. And so the more you can make us aware as we undertake this examination, the more likely we are to have a nice cohesive response that we can work from from a smooth start, as opposed to having things like this pop up later. Okay, thank you. All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Yep, the final question is from Saya Sakardande.
Saya?
Hi, President Gable. My name's actually pronounced Sia Sakardande.
Apologies.
I'm an undergraduate CLA senator, and I use she, her pronouns. And I had heard you talk about the PRISM group that you had worked on, and I just wanted to know, like, because you had mentioned that they were going to bring updates to the June Board of Regents meeting, would they be discussing like kind of like the hiring crisis that's going on, like with counselors, like at Boynton, and kind of the backlog of appointments that has been going on that's like been causing more of this crisis for student mental health?
Thank you, Sia. So I don't know the exact content of their presentation yet, but but in general, the availability of resources, whether it be clinicians or other support, sometimes through telehealth, sometimes through non-clinical or non-licensed response for those who are at different who have the need that can be met in that way. And the overall availability of treatment is one of the tenets of the program. So certainly that's what they will be talking about, something related to what you're describing. We've just received really interesting data this morning nationally around the fact that there's a lot of discussion nationally around the availability of counselors and what the shortage of counselors means for student mental health, for faculty and staff mental health too, but also how students are asking for that. This is a national aggregated observation that's being studied, a national response that can be other than the typical go into the clinical care environment and talk to a counselor response, and the tools that are emerging that are preferred by students, and how we can make sure we bridge to a nice portfolio of support so that we can meet students where they are in all the different ways they seek that support in order to ensure that the crisis isn't exacerbated by a lack of care. Okay, thank you. If we did not get to your question, I think you all know how to get a hold of us, and we would be delighted to take your question offline. So next item is the provost report. For this, I will call on Executive Vice President and Provost Rachel Croson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all again toward the end of the semester. I have a few updates on both things that I've talked a little bit about before and we've made some progress on, and maybe a couple of new items. So let me start off talking about some of the searches that we have planned that some of you might have heard about. So we are launching a search for the new dean for the Carlson School of Management. Dean Zahir has served for 10 years, done incredible things, and is prepared to step back to the faculty next academic year. And so we're in the process of forming that search committee, and they will go through the normal search process. I also, I think, mentioned in the previous meeting, but the announcement came out today of the search for director/vice provost for distributed education. So this is a re-envisioned position to help deliver on the strategic plan element to offer system-wide, comprehensive, distributed education that draws on the strengths of all of our campuses. And this individual, their rank will depend on exactly their position at the university, would be responsible for running a small shop and delivering on that commitment. Finally, I mentioned before, but I think these positions are now public, 3 faculty fellow positions in the Office for Faculty Affairs. And those are going to be different positions focused on different elements. And I want to encourage anyone, especially people with governance experience, but really anyone with an interest in improving the situation of our faculty, both through policy and through implementation, to consider applying for those. Those positions are planned to start over the fall and be in place for the next academic year. Finally, we have 2 searches that they're planning to be launched in the fall. One is a search for the permanent assistant vice president for public engagement. As you know, Dr. Furco stepped down from that position, and Dr. Heidi Barajas has been running that organization for this as an interim, and she's been fantastic. But I did promise her that I would find a permanent replacement, and so that search is likely to launch in the fall. And finally, in the fall, we're going to be relaunching the search for the dean of the School of Public Health. And we expect that that will sort of follow a normal cycle and take a year, and hopefully interim dean Tim Beebe will be able to step down as planned in June, July of 2023. A second topic I wanted to address is about test optionality. So as I mentioned at our last meeting, I had a discussion. We did some analysis about the student success metrics of the incoming class for fall 2021, looking at their outcomes from the fall semester. And I made a presentation to the Board of Regents around test option, our plans for test optionality moving forward. We had a very robust discussion about strengths and weaknesses of both the current system and where we were intending to go. But we have now decided that the university is going to remain test optional through the fall semester 2025. So for the incoming class of the fall semester 2025, that will give us 4 years of data to be able to evaluate the impact on student success, the impact on the diversity of our student body, and all kinds of other measures that we want to think about. And we think that will give us a good amount of data in order to make an informed decision at that point. So that's been now, I believe, publicly announced, and our admissions team and our recruiters are very excited about that and will continue to act based on that guidance. We're looking forward to the May Board of Regents meeting. As is our tradition in May, we're going to focus on faculty. So we have a presentation around promotion and tenure. We are returning to our pre-pandemic tradition of having a panel of faculty who've been recently promoted to present to the regents about their research. One deviation from previous years is we intend to have a faculty member promoted to full, a faculty member who's been promoted to associate with tenure, and a contract faculty member who's been promoted. And we think that will better represent the span of the work that our faculty does in the various positions that they hold. Our second presentation at that meeting is going to be explicitly about fixed term and contract faculty. As you know, there's been activity from faculty governance and advocacy for faculty governance around this topic. There was a task force that put forth a set of recommendations. We are acting on those recommendations, and May is our opportunity to inform the board about that activity and get their input about our direction in the future. As you know, we are undertaking a revision of our core curriculum. As I've said in various settings, universities need to revitalize their core curriculum about once every 10 years, and it's been a lot longer than that at the University of Minnesota. You'll hear today from Dr. Druffy about the process that's going on. They're in the process of holding forums and collecting input, and I want to encourage you and all of your colleagues to participate in that. And then finally, let me just say I am very much looking forward to the remainder of the semester, and especially to commencements. Crazy as it is, I've been here for 2 years. I have never been to a University of Minnesota commencement. And so I'm really delighted by the opportunity to attend some. I have my robes in the little closet behind me, and I'm going to be there just really excited to see the joy of our students and their family and the pride of the faculty who helped them get to where they are, and just the wonderful event that I know it will be. So that concludes my report, and I'm happy to take questions from the floor.
Questions for the provost? Scott?
Hi, Provost Croson. Scott Petty, graduate student senator from CFANS. My question's a follow-up question from one of the undergraduate students who asked a question to President Gabel. So over the last couple of years, I know that I've been drawn into at least 3 conversations where lab-based RA grad students were discussing the use of unpaid undergraduate volunteers in labs in order to qualify for diversity elements in grants. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the ethics of, number one, using undergraduate students in general to check boxes for diversity requirements in research grants, and number two, doing so while not paying the undergraduate students that you are using to check the boxes on the diversity components of grants.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Like President Gable, this is not a practice that I'm familiar with here. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's never been kind of called to my attention before. And I'm grateful for you and our undergraduate senator for calling that to our attention. On the one hand, I wouldn't want to prevent the opportunity for students to volunteer in labs in order to gather research experiences. On the other hand, I want to make sure that we are protecting them from exploitation. And so I'm sure there's a set of policies that we could think about or nuanced kind of statements that we could think about making that would achieve both of those goals.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Provost Croson. Item 11 is the SEC report. I'm going to call on Professor Ned Patterson to give this report. Ned?
Thank you, President Gable. I have 5 fairly brief items to report, as almost all the rest of it's in the Senate meeting, so we don't need to go over those. So some recent Senate Consultative Committee work and leadership work. We had a total compensation report from Mary Roman Kuhl, Director of Total Compensation and HR, in the context too of student salaries, graduate student stipends, postdoc salaries, just thinking holistically, and we're going to continue those conversations that are important to all employees of any form. We've also been having consultation on proposed constitutional changes. I've mentioned before, some in all the constitutions led by a work group from the Senate that will be coming to the Senate next fall, and then even some additional onto Senate committees will probably be the next step. So just people should be aware those are coming at the Senate Consultative Committees, having in-depth conversations. Upcoming, the Senate Consultative Committee will be meeting with the System-Wide Misconduct Task Force, chaired by faculty Senator Jen Goodnow from chemistry, and FCC member. I'm also on that task force, so that's coming to SCC. It's also been to FCC and a number of other campus committees, and there's very robust conversation on that. We're also we're kind of connecting with the Campus Safety Committee leadership, and an update about this year and what's been happening is likely coming up. And lastly, I just wanted to mention, this is a little more technically in the Faculty Senate, but there's representatives of all groups on these committees for fixed term faculty and P&A teaching and research academic professionals. I tasked a task force on that. And there's work, as I've mentioned before, on a possible Senate subcommittee from the Senate Committee of Faculty Affairs that will be discussed and voted on in May at their meeting. And also, just so everybody knows, as there's P&A at this Senate and some P&A academic professionals in the Faculty Senate, Vice Provost Ropers and I will be presenting information on these positions and statistics and considerations on May 12th at the Board of Regents meeting during the Mission Fulfillment Committee meeting, which starts around 9:15. And this presentation is likely 10 a.m. as I know there's interested people, and I would welcome you to join in or see the recording afterwards. And that is the 5 items from my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Item 12 is the Faculty Legislative Liaison Report. I would please call on Professor Donna Spanos-Martin to give this report. Donna?
Thank you, President Gable. Right before you came to this meeting, faculty and staff should have received an email update from Kelly Melberg in the University Relations, Government Relations. And that has additional information and links, and you can also find more information on the Government Relations page. So I'll just hit the main points here. As President Gable mentioned, there's about 4.5 weeks left of this legislative session. It's been an interesting year since the state has a $9.25 billion budget surplus. And then in addition, last session, there was $1.15 billion that was set aside from the Federal American Rescue Plan Act that is to be allocated this session. And if the House and the Senate can't decide together how that should be used, then the governor will get to decide how that money is used. Our supplemental budget request was $240 million, and the focus of that was on safety and security, with $90 million in one-time funds and $10 million in recurring funds. And then also in sustainability and innovation, and that was $85 million in recurring funds. So we requested 240 million. The governor has put in his proposal $43 million. The House has put in $32.5 million into their request, and the Senate has put in $2.45 million. So their request is much lower. For capital investment, we had requested $682 million. The governor has recommended $213.8 million, which would be $140 million for the HEPA request and $72 million for the chemistry building on the Twin Cities campus. The House and the Senate have not passed bills yet, so we don't know what will be their request. For capital investment, it needs a 3/5 majority to pass in both of those chambers, so more than just the simple majority. So that will have to be bipartisan. We'll see where that goes. So we don't know much about that at the moment. I will end with what I have usually said every time I've been here, that, you know, what happens, a lot of it depends on you. I encourage you to sign up for the email notifications from government relations at advocates.umn.edu. Nobody can tell your story better than you can, and it's those personal stories that help make a difference. So I would encourage you to sign up. We will probably have 2 big pushes to contact legislators, one in a couple weeks and then one towards the end of the session. The session ends May 23rd, I believe it is. And so we will have, you'll get a couple notices yet to write your legislators. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Item 13 concerns the dates of next year's University and Faculty Senate meetings and is presented for information. Item 14 is discussion and action on resolutions concerning fees for graduate student employees. I'm going to call on Professor Colleen Flaherty Manchester to present this item on behalf of the SEC. Colleen?
Just trying to find that unmute button. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen and then present a few slides to go along with these resolutions. So thank you, President Gable. So I'm Colleen Flaherty Manchester. I am the, chair-elect of the SEC, and I'm be presenting these resolutions on behalf of the SEC. Just by way of background, these resolutions are drafted for the graduate student population, which are students who are represented by COGS, and this is separate from professional degree students, just to kind of add that clarification before I get started. All right, so let's provide a little bit of background information on graduate student fees so we can understand these resolutions. So they vary in terms of the exact amount, but they often range from about $800 to $1,500 per semester, and it varies depending on the program and specifics of the student. For example, to what extent they are using the health insurance on campus, or whether they're an international student. Those are other reasons for why those fees may vary, but they do cover many things. They cover student service fees. So for example, access to Rockwell and Boynton, other kind of graduate student specific services like the student parent child care grant, for example. They also cover, or can cover, for those who are electing health insurance coverage, the student payment for that. There's university and collegiate fees as well. And then for international students, it's a student services fee. So more information can be found on the graduate student programs and this fee website, but I just want to get you a sense of that magnitude. So by way of the history around why we're here about these resolutions today, was really an important concern that was raised in an earlier resolution called Resolution Concerning Graduate Assistant Fees, that was authored by Senators George John and Scott Penny. And it was really focusing on a problem, not a problematic timing of when these graduate student fees are paid. And essentially, the problem that they raised was that a lot of students, graduate students who, let's say, are on a stipend from a fellowship or from an assistantship, they maybe get their first paycheck, but at the same time, they have to also pay these relatively, sizable amounts of money up front. And so that can be a problem, particularly for first-year students who also are incurring a lot of other expenses at that time. So we've been consulting on this timing issue, and in that process, other concerns were raised or emerged. So concern about how to feasibly address this timing concern, how to who it applies to. So beyond just graduate assistantships, for example, which was kind of the specifics of that initial resolution. Concerns were raised around communication, making sure everyone is aware of these fees and at the time of accepting their admission into graduate program. And then also kind of questions were being raised on whether to assess these fees at all and to who. And so that's kind of the background that led to the resolutions today. So the resolutions I'm put on the screen here are also in the docket, but I just wanted to make a couple more comments around these three. So we will be voting on them individually, but just want to make sure we understand the first two were, I would say, more heavily consulted in terms of that resolution that Senators John and Petty brought to various groups throughout this year has really focused a lot on that question of timing. And so that's really reflected in Resolution 1. And Resolution 2 is a companion, I would say, because it really talks about the consistency and transparency around the fees. And then the Resolution 3, which I have in blue, it's more of a starting. It's a starting point in terms of we need to have more information to really understand the cost implications of reducing, eliminating fees for certain groups. And so we're asking the administration to model what some of those cost implications could be and what, are there consequences that we need to know about, such as what are the effects on program size, for example. So that's how I want to present these three resolutions. Again, the first two I think are more direct and maybe more heavily consulted, while the third is kind of like how we can continue to understand and potentially consult and advocate around fee elimination for certain groups. So that's what I have for my introductory comments. And I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. Next, I'm going to call on Scott Lanyon to give 2 minutes or less of introductory remarks regarding these resolutions. Scott?
Thank you, President Gable. So very quickly, grad school perspective on this, this idea of this problem of a fee payment that graduate assistants and grad fellows are charged at the start of a semester is relatively large compared to their stipend check. This was brought to the grad school's attention by COGS leadership, by Scott Petty and George Sean last fall. And we've been looking at alternative ways to eliminate the problem. There's disagreement over how to do this, and we're looking at that, but everyone I've spoken with agrees that this is a problem. And the provost and I have communicated to COGS and SIG's leadership that we're committed to finding a solution by the fall semester. So just an update on that. Regarding the second resolution, again, the idea that fees should be communicated to students, not just before they start their roles as University of Minnesota graduate students, but before they accept our offer would be a great practice. And our understanding is that the majority of our programs are doing this already for international students, because international students who are receiving an RATA or fellowship have to demonstrate that they have sufficient funds to handle the cost of attendance. For several years, we've been, as a graduate school, promoting that programs do this, a graduate school promoting that programs do this for all of our students. We're not clear on how many are actually doing that at this point, but that is considered a best practice. With regard to the third resolution, the grad school is certainly positioned to determine
30 seconds.
What our fees are across colleges. But to do this, obviously, this would require a large group to figure out what the right strategy is, how we might handle this, and modeling it would be an interesting approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, next I'm going to call on our SIGS rep, Moinak Chowdhury. Moinak?
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to us. I'd like to thank the original authors and the committee for building on this resolution. So since I work with this Council of International Grad Students, some of the concerns we had, I'd like to talk about 3 of them particularly. The first is concerning the $175 extra that we pay, which is apparently goes to the ISSS. For the first question is that it's not always levied by other universities. Why do we pay this fee? And second, our benefits have actually been cut, such as access to tax software that ISSS used to provide. But the ISS fee has remained the same. So why are we paying the same fee if our benefits have been cut? Where a bit more clarity on how this fee goes to and how the university can support us. Second, we also pay a $14 student engagement fee. I'm wondering if the university can support international students just as it does for domestic students. Why do we have to pay an extra fee for student engagement? And can the university support us? And third, part of the student services fee have little to no engagement with graduate students and particularly international fees. For instance, the media fee includes a small but substantial fee for the Students for Conservative Voices, $1.29, I think. So I'm wondering how we can understand when some of these fees have no engagement with prospective students who are going to pay this fee and current students who pay this fee. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Moinak. And then lastly, we're going to call on COGS, and I'm not sure if this is going to be Noah Wexler or Richard Gonigan, but whichever of you would like to present, the floor is yours for 2 minutes or less. Okay, thank you, Sarani. In that event, we'll move forward. Now, the way we're going to handle these 3 resolutions or 3 motions is they will each receive a separate vote, but given the very close nature of the 3, we're going to have one general discussion for all 3. And so with that, I will open the floor for comments and discussion. Yes, Sarani, please introduce yourself.
Sarani Milligan. I am the current SSCC Student Senate Chair. I use she, her pronouns. I just want to speak very strongly in favor of all 3 resolutions because I think they speak to what I felt was the consensus point of view at the end of it. There's more work to be done, but this is in particular really important work. I do want to point out that the language in the first resolution says graduate students as opposed to graduate assistants, which was the graduate assistant language was in the original resolution. So I'm kind of wondering whether this proposed resolution has a different meaning, or if not, whether it makes sense to modify it to be very clear about what we're asking. But regardless, I think this is a statement of principle. And this is a good principle. And as Professor Lanyon was saying, I don't think anybody's opposed. And it would be great to have that statement of principle recorded.
Thank you, Sarani. Tony?
Thank you, President Gable. Tony Fussy, Civil Service Senator. My question also was the same, is regarding the way it's been talked about back and forth has been about employees, graduate employees. So if it's going to be all graduate students, I get concerned about waiving some of these fees, because then what will the undergraduates start saying? So if it is going to be limited just to those grad assistant, grad fellows, people that are getting stipends or being paid, that's the way that it sounds like it's always been discussed in our meetings that have come up. But the other kind of note that I have as part of the 3rd resolution of getting rid of these fees, I wonder if anybody has really proposed how that the university would backfill all of those fees and what they fund. And would they be just rolled into tuition? Would do the, for both graduate and undergraduate, propose that they would just be abolished? And then how would we fund everything that fund? Those are big fees. And the current fee system also allocates all those automatically to all those different places like Boynton, Kaufman, Rec Center, and all the other smaller organizations too, including things like ISSS and whatnot. But those are kind of my question again, like Sarai had about the scope of the whole thing, but I also get a little bit worried about getting rid of all these fees because it will not only trickle down to undergraduate, and then we're going to be in a world of hurt, I feel like, with funding all those initiatives.
Thank you, Tony. Colleen, I'm going to throw you two questions. First, can you clarify for everybody grad student versus grad assistant, because that has come up offline? And then also, can you clarify what the third resolution, the scope, or restate the scope of the third resolution, please?
Yeah, and I'll do my best on the studies definitions as well. But my understanding is that the term graduate assistant is likely too narrow, because this problem is also, in terms of the timing of the fees, is also being felt by those on fellowships. And so the word assistantship, I think in our consultation, heard that to be too narrow. And so that's why the resolution 1 says graduate students. And we can talk with Scott about that, but I think the solution being devised would be available to all graduate students, perhaps. But I guess it's just a problem that a lot of students are facing regardless of their exact employment status, for one. And then on 3, it's again the same issue around assistantships versus fellowships, and the concern that is there a reason to treat those two groups differently? And that's why it says graduate student positions. And the purpose, again, of resolution 3 is to kind of bring up really what Tony was just mentioned, Senator Fussy was just mentioning, in terms of what are these implications. So it's not to stop the fees just immediately, it's to understand what the consequences would be and model that, so we can then have consultation and advocacy going forward on the different trade-offs. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you, Colleen. Was there anything additionally that you wanted to add with your hand raised, or were you preparing
that was it? Yeah.
Thank you. Christopher.
Hi, yes, again, Christopher Stallard, undergrad from CSE. And at the beginning of the discussion here, Scott Lanyon had said, with regard to the second resolution, that the fees should be transparently communicated before the grad students even accept their position, which I think is a more fair and a better interpretation of the language. So I would move to amend the second motion to read before they accept their graduate student roles rather than before they start in.
Colleen, is that a friendly amendment?
I take that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Christopher? No, okay. Adam?
Hello, everyone. Adam Stichlow, graduate student senator for College of Biological Sciences and vice chair-elect for the Student Senate. I want to just give my full support for all 3 of these motions. It is incredibly important that we are transparent to our graduate students who are workers for the university, who do provide a benefit to the university, both through their immediate research, through their outputs in general, and of course, through any funding that they get, either through fellowships or through funding that ultimately the PIs search for in order to fund the graduate students as well. So in that sense, it is very important that we support graduate students broadly, that we're clear to what's going on ahead of time, and look to eliminate these fees, which are a burden, as there is a high cost for graduate students in general. So please, I implore all of you to vote yes on all 3 resolutions.
Thank you, Adam. Jerry?
Jerry Cohen, faculty senator from CFANS. So I've always been interested in how one pays for things from grant money. It's been a passion of mine for a number of years, especially when I worked for a granting agency. So I looked at these fees, and what bothers me about them is some of them, like paying for football stadiums, is going to be really a hard lift to pay off of grant funds. I don't think you'll be able to do it. There's other, which is a capital enhancement fee, which I tried to figure out what that was. But as far as I can tell, that's already covered under uniform guidance. This point should be paid out of indirect fees. So I was just, my only comment is unwinding these needs a really careful look, which doesn't appear to be part of what the FCC did or the SCC. Because a lot of these fees, to come up with a proper solution to them is going to require a lot of unwinding that doesn't seem to have been done. I fully support removing all these fees from graduate students, but it turns out that these fees actually are pretty complicated to do that. And I just want to bring that to your attention because that's no small lift. Number 3, the third motion is extremely complicated, and passing it without going into that complexity is actually kind of narrow-minded. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm going to go out of order, and Noah Wexler, I'm going to call on you to give your 2 minutes of commentary on behalf of COGS, which we offered earlier and want to make available to you now.
Yeah, thanks. So from the graduate student perspective, I think there's a couple of things that we still would like to see more clarification on in how the resolution is currently worded. First thing is we really want to make sure that the first part of this resolution, resolution 1, tackles the core problem here, which is that if you choose right now to enroll in a monthly payment plan, you are still on the hook for an additional charge of $20, which seems to be, unnecessarily and additionally burdensome. In conversations that we've had in COGS and SIGs, another issue is if you, in the current status quo, cannot pay the fees by the deadline the first couple of weeks of the semester, you then are incurred late charges. And so the real issue is if the Senate is serious about making this sort of lump sum payment that we all have to face less of a burden at the beginning of each semester, then the additional financial charges that we incur if we cannot make that lump sum payment need to go away. I mean, that is especially unacceptable. The fact that there are late charges that are incurred when grad students are just starting grad school here, just starting their grad assistantship, and then are on the hook for, $1,000 without getting their first paycheck. Then they see a late charge when they can't make that. That's unacceptable. And if they choose to enroll in a monthly payment plan, they have to pay even more money.
30
Sorry?
30
Thanks.
seconds. Mhm.
The other thing I'd need to question is, why is 2027 the timeline? This seems to be sort of arbitrary. There's a lot of grad students right now who want these fees gone. There are many grad students who are not paying these fees in programs that have already found ways to cover them. And I think the real charge needs to be that more programs and more departments find ways to make it so that people, especially grad assistants who are working for the university, don't have to pay money back to their employer.
Time.
Thank you, Noah. Okay, next is Scott Petty. Scott?
Greetings. Again, my name is Scott Petty. I'm CPAN's graduate student senator. I was one of the authors of the original resolution. I'm going to go a little bit out of order. So motion 2 is redundant and pointless. It's already, this has been OHR policy for at least a decade. The problem is no one monitors it and no one enforces it. So there's widespread violation. No one checks to make sure that, so in this decentralized university, programs have this incredibly strong incentive to violate the policy. No one monitors them and they know that there's no punishment if they get caught. And therefore, other than COGS, no one monitors to make sure that the OHR policy that already covers this is followed. When I ran COGS, I literally had a conversation with Kathy Brown when she was VP of HR, where I had to point this out to her in her own policies because she didn't know that it existed. But it does exist, so passing number 2 is pointless. For number 3, the question I've always had, and perhaps someone here can answer it, why don't we just create an in-state graduate student tuition rate that's $2,000 more than the in-state undergraduate tuition? Pass that $2,000 to the grad school, let the grad school disperse it out to pay for services that grad students use. For number one, this kind of misses the point. Payment plans and the late fees, President Kaler did that years ago. Employed graduate students are already exempted from the late fee. The issue is I am poor. According to the state of Minnesota, I am extremely poor. I live on $14,000 a year while the university says that they pay me $16,000. I don't want the university to say that they pay me $16,000 when they pay me $14,000. That's the point. So motion 1, I think, is irrelevant. Motion 2 is already policy, and motion 3 is really. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Sarani?
Hard to follow Scott. So despite motion 2 being pointless, I think it's important to pass it anyway, because perhaps the fact that we're talking about it will mean that departments will start complying. I think it's really important to comply, and I think this conversation needs to happen. We have an insane amount of documentation that everybody is supposed to comply with. With regards to motion 3, I think it's an invitation to continue to engage in this dialogue with an end goal of 2027. I would love for this to happen tomorrow, but based on the comments we've already heard, it's not going to happen tomorrow. So I like the fact that we're asking for a commitment to phase these out. I want to add to Scott's point about being extremely broke and having to come up with $1,000. I've been there. I was a graduate student for years. It wasn't at this university. And it's the amount of stress you go through knowing that you might have to make this payment and then fall short is, persons should not, as a matter of principle, have to worry about food, about rent, or consider foregoing food in order to pay school fees, which is a story that we have heard at this university. And this is a really easy fix.
30 seconds.
So we would really like to get the Senate to pass this advisory motion requesting that the administration do something, because it's not like we can force them. And this is a really important conversation to continue to have. And it makes me very sad sometimes to think about how much we are working on the language when the principle is what matters.
Thank you, Sarani. Okay, I know we still have hands up, but we're at time on the discussion of the item. So thank you, Monica and Adam, and apologies that we weren't able to get to you. It's time to call for the vote on this item. We had one discussion, but we'll take each motion separately. So on motion 1, Chris, if you could post the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 126 ayes, 12 nays, and 8 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. On motion 2 with the friendly amendment, Chris, could you post the poll? And as you're voting, please note the friendly amendment that changed start in their graduate role to accepted in their graduate role.
Go about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 142 ayes, 3 nays, and 3 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And last but not least, the third motion, please.
About 10 more seconds. And last call. There being 118 ayes, 19 nays, and 8 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, on to the next item. Item 15 is a discussion of the general education curriculum. I would like to call on Professor Will Durfee to present this item, please. Will?
Great, thank you, President Gable, and thank you, senators and others who are listening for including this topic on your agenda today. My name is Will Durfee, and I'm a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, and I chair the Core Curriculum 2025 Committee. I've got some opening remarks, following which we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So what is the Core Curriculum 2025 Committee? We've been charged by the Senate Committee on Educational Policy, a committee of faculty and students, and by the provost to, and I quote, develop recommendations for a new or revised general education program that could be required of all undergraduates on the Twin Cities campus who are admitted in fall 2025 and beyond. In other words, what might modify or replace the liberal education requirements that every undergraduate student on the Twin Cities campus must satisfy? This is a fascinating task because it's really asking the question, what should every student know upon graduating from the University of Minnesota? Now, this is by no means saying that the current LE system is bad. And in fact, the principles stated on the LE page still ring true. And I quote from that page, "In education that invites you to investigate the world from new perspectives, learn new ways of thinking, and grow as an active citizen and lifelong learner." So why now? As we heard from the provost earlier, the reason is that the current system of diversified core and designated themes has been in place for almost 30 years, and the world, students, and faculty have undergone significant changes since 1991. Now, we may, when all is said and done, determine that the current system is exactly what we want and need for the 21st century. Or we may determine that some tweaks are needed. Or we may determine that major change is required. Our committee is proceeding with full knowledge of the 1991 Howe Committee that established the current liberal education, diversified core, and designated theme system, the 2008 Schiff Committee that renewed the commitment to the diversified core and designated themes model, but with some changes, the 2019 Colset Committee that recommended changes to liberal education requirements, which were not adopted by the Faculty Senate, and the 2021 change to require that every student take the Race, Power, and Justice in the United States designated theme. Now, we've got a terrific committee of students, faculty, and advisors, but we're just a group of 17 and in no way can figure this out on our own. Meaningful change can only come through a collaborative process, which is why we're spending this semester listening to the University of Minnesota community. We're partway through a series of 7 forums for students, faculty, advisors, and employers. And we'd like to hear from you, the senators, and your ideas about the strengths and weaknesses of our current system and your ideas about what every student should know. So Chris or Amber, could you screen share the slide that I sent you? Great. Thank you. So what you see are some of the broad questions that the committee has been using to guide the conversations with the community. And question 1, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the current UMN liberal education requirements? Number 2, what's the purpose of a general education now compared to 30 years ago when our current LE system was created? And then 3, what knowledge and perspective of the big questions and challenges of today should every University of Minnesota graduate have by the time they graduate? And while these questions serve to seed the conversation, they're not there to restrict yours or any other person's comments. So that concludes my introduction. And now I and any of the other committee members in attendance would love to hear from you. So President Gable, back to you to moderate the discussion, and you can stop the screen share.
Okay, thank you, Will. All right, any feedback, discussion, for Will or other members of the committee with our appreciation for the work you've done up to this point and in anticipation of the work that's coming? Carter.
Hello. I just want to make one point, or sort of my own personal perception and observation on the thing. I worked really closely with Professor Catherine Pearson last year in the creation and proposal and ultimate enactment of the race, power, and justice theme proposal for liberal education themes. And the conversations we had during that time, and MSA's vote to endorse the proposal and the Senate's eventual vote to approve it. All of that discourse, I think, revolved around an idea that I think was and remains and will continue to be essential to how we understand and strive to supply higher education. And it's that it is both a missed opportunity and I think a failure of moral obligation if students graduate from the university without some level of academic engagement with concepts related to racial injustice and racial inequity and the ways in which our world interacts with the systems of oppression and identity. I think that it's really important that whatever new system comes about, that concept at its core is kept really central to the goals of the university and the requirements of all students, regardless of what they study. That there is some level of engagement with that concept and with those systems, I think is really important, especially considering where our university is and the composition both of demographics on campus and beyond. So that would be my point. I really look forward to the committee's sort of eventual proposals, but I hope that idea is kept at the heart of a lot of the work. So I look forward to seeing how it turns out. Thanks.
Thank you, Carter. Sarani?
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could talk a bit more about how you plan to include students as you go forward. You said that this semester was a listening semester, but I want to make sure that we all have an opportunity to weigh in on an ongoing basis. So I was just wondering what steps were planned for that.
Will, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Sarani. Yeah, it's absolutely essential that the student voice be continuous throughout the process. And so we did, these forums are really coming at the end of the semester, and we recognize that the timing of the two that we have for students might not have been the best. So already we're going to schedule some for the fall for certain, but beyond that, we're not limiting ourselves to the forums. And so would expect that you or anyone else, contact any person of the committee at any time with your views. So we'll be both, reaching out, and we're hoping that people can also reach to the committee as well. But absolutely, the student input to this process is necessary for this to be successful. So thank you for those comments. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, feedback? Adolfo. You're still muted, sorry. Okay.
Hello, President Gable. Adolfo Carrillo Cabello from the PNA Senate. I was curious to learn a little more about the composition of the working group, and in particular, the rationale for not including people with expertise in language, particularly the previous comment mentioning the need for intercultural competence to be part of the curriculum. So I was curious if there are plans for linguistic and intercultural competence to be part of the attributes to be considered.
Adolfo, we're going to hold that and see what the other questions are, and then I'll let Will do sort of a group response with your indulgence. Shireen.
Yes, hi, President Gable and Professor Durfee. Thank you for your work on this. I just wanted to add that including an interdisciplinary approach to education is, I would argue that is key these days. Also, we have a lot of ways to incorporate interdisciplinary work, research, resources, ideas, thoughts. So I would just point to an interdisciplinary approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Wanda.
Hi, my name is Wanda Marsalik. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a faculty senator from the libraries. And as an alumni of the university and also now as an employee, I'm curious if you will be reaching out to alumni to hear about their experiences and maybe think about things that they wish they would have been able to have in their education. As a first generation student, I learned many things and I'm still having to deal with some of those things and do a lot of work on my own, but I would recommend or potentially thinking about reaching out to alumni to see what they wish they would have been able to learn in the last 30 years.
Thank you. Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you, Will, for your time that you're putting into this committee and leading it. One question, I'm trying to remember back to when the last committee worked on this for several years and then brought to a vote. It seemed like one of the concerns was around like credit hours and how it would affect budgets. And so I'm just wondering to what extent your committee is also considering like the feasibility besides just the content.
Are there other questions? Okay, Will. So, oh, Anna, please.
Good. All right, you can hear me. One thing I was wondering about is kind of related to the last question was about the funding model for different colleges and how tuition dollars flow and how sometimes that gets in the way of us in different colleges competing for those dollars and how we can't not think about that when these issues come up, and also how that sometimes makes it challenging to encourage interdisciplinary coursework. So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christopher.
Hi, yes, Christopher Stallard, CSE student. And my question is, have you considered reaching out to departments and trying to get it so that there are more liberal education requirements fulfilled by departments where, like, if I'm taking an upper division course, it would teach me how to like take an interdisciplinary approach, combine the theme that I'm learning in the general education course with my specific major so that I actually am able to apply this. And so I would like to promote that sort of work.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, Will, oh, yes, Shireen, do you have another question?
Oh, it's not a question, it's just a comment.
Sure.
Responding to Christopher, because I work with the Interdisciplinary Center for the Study of Global Change. So I would, in addition to reaching out to departments, also the different centers on the university campus that already do such work. For instance, we do graduate training and we already have components of this interdisciplinary work that's been in motion for the past 30 years and is a solid model for such work. So yes, I just wanted to echo that and add that we should include centers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shireen. Yes, of course, thank you. Other? Okay, Will, I'll give you sort of a wrap-up question. We heard feedback on content around, and forgive me, colleagues, for paraphrasing, but just in the interest of phrasing this as a question, equity, language, interdisciplinarity. You received some feedback on parties with whom you might consult at the departmental or center level, alum consultation. And then there were a couple of questions around the way in which your assessment might be affected by or affect credit hours, funding, the influence of how revenue distribution may affect your work. Do you have any anything you'd like to add or feedback you'd like to provide on that feedback that you heard?
Yeah, no, this is terrific. Love the ideas and the thoughts about what should be, components of it. So the ideas we heard about, linguistics, intercultural, interdisciplinary. That's great. This is just the kind of input that the committee needs in order to proceed. And yeah, we are going to be connected with the Alumni Association. Absolutely, Wanda, really terrific, because that's an important constituency to get their viewpoint. So that's great. And then connecting to the center, Shireen, thanks so much for that comment. Really, the comment about connecting to the work within the major at advanced level is really interesting. To some extent, that's the writing enriched curriculum model, where writing as a skill is taught within the major, and certainly, the thought that some of these other core parts of a liberal education might be tied in that way. That's a really interesting thought. So thanks for bringing that up. Finally, Colleen brought up the credit hours around the last time. Yes, we're absolutely aware, and myself in a mechanical engineering department with a very large number of credit hours required of our students, so we're very sensitive to that. And then two people brought up the funding model and the motivation and the possibilities of doing interdisciplinary courses and so on. Yes, we understand all of the ramifications of the current, well, not all of them, but many of the budget model, and many of the people of the committee have been involved in various parts of faculty governance. I think what we're doing is first approaching it, the general principles, independent of how the university currently is choosing to finance itself. Then the next stage, when we start to think about moving these general principles to a program that might work in the university, that's where things like the fiscal models come up. Now, while we have to be cognizant of fiscal realities. We've been instructed by the provost to not let the current budget model get in the way. So depending upon what we come up with, there's a possibility that the budget model could change to match what this university wants to do. And so I think we're putting aside that for now, because the minute you get bogged down in conversations about budget model, the motivation, so on, that really squashes the really important work of discussing what every student should know. But thanks so much for that input. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Will. Sarani, did you follow up on that?
Yes, on the note of what every student should know, I think basic functional adulting skills. Sometimes we produce graduates, and I think this is liberal education still. Sometimes we produce graduates who are entering the real world and don't know necessarily things like taxes or insurance or those kinds of things. And I know that there are courses available to address that, but I would like for that to receive consideration as something to be included as part of the basic requirements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you very much for that feedback. Ongoing process, and I'm sure we will be engaging frequently and in an incremental way around this work. So, and well, thank you again to you and the committee for everything you're doing. All right, that brings us to our next item, which is old business. There is no old business for the University Senate. The next item is new business for the University Senate. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Scott.
I would like to motion for us to consider now to have a little bit of a discussion about the rules and the leadership and how the leadership should, how we as members should be trying to hold the leadership accountable when they more or less blatantly violate the rules of the Senate. I would like to ask my fellow senators for the 2/3 to actually have such a discussion.
Is there, okay, so let me make sure I do this right. Is there, do we call for a second? And then vote on whether to have this now or whether to send this to committee for additional consideration? Okay, so is there a second? Adam, are you seconding?
I'll second.
Okay. Please note that this is not debatable. We can have and remain within time, 10 minutes of discussion. The vote, that discussion that we are having now is whether to approve this motion now or whether to send it to committee. That is the first vote that we will call. Oh, sorry, apologies. Just want to make sure I follow the process correctly. First, we are voting on whether to debate this motion now or whether to send it to committee and have it come back for future discussion after it's been through committee. So Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 66 ayes, 67 nays, and 3 abstentions, that motion does not prevail.
Thank you. We will send that to committee. Next item is motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion? In a second. Scott, are you motioning?
Yes, so moved.
All right, is there a second? All right, look at all those seconds. What's up with that? All right, Chris, can you initiate the poll, please?
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 131 ayes, 5 nays, and 1 abstention, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned. I'm going to announce a brief break. Faculty senators should stay. And in a few moments, we will call for the Faculty Senate meeting to begin. Thank you all very much. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Faculty Senate to order. I'll start by saying this is a meeting of the Faculty Senate. So while non-faculty senators are welcome to attend this meeting, only faculty senators may introduce business and vote on matters considered at the meeting. Others may have the floor only if yielded time by a faculty senator and recognized by the chair. With that, I'll go to item 2, which is a motion to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. A 2/3 majority of those present and voting is required to approve the special rule. Is there any discussion? Okay, Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 77 ayes and 3 nays, that motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 3 concerns administrative responses to Faculty Senate actions and is presented for information. There are no responses pending. Item 4 is approval of the minutes from the Faculty Senate meeting from March 31st, 2022. Chris, if you could initiate the poll on the motion to approve the minutes.
Again, give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 72 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 5 is the FCC report. I'll call on Professor Ned Patterson to give this report. Ned?
Thank you, President Gable. I have 8 items. It should be fairly brief again, hopefully. I'm going to repeat one in case there's any faculty centers or P&A teaching and research academic professionals or faculty centers that missed this, that we're working on a possible subcommittee for fixed term faculty and P&A teaching and research academic professionals of the Senate Committee on Faculty Affairs that will be at the May meeting of that committee. And then also Vice Provost Rebecca Ropers and I will be presenting information on those positions and some information at the May 12th Board of Regents meeting and the Mission Fulfillment Committee committee specifically, which starts at 9:15 on May 12th, and that item is likely around 10. Recent FCC meetings, we met with a Faculty Misconduct Task Force representatives, Jen Goodnow as chairing that, and a couple of FCC members were on that committee, and we will be having a second meeting with the Faculty Misconduct Task Force, and then most of that should be coming back for even broader consultation next fall is the general plan. In our retreat last August for FCC, we wanted DEI work to be a big initiative, and we've been thinking about things where faculty governance can lead in that. And so we did invite in the Equity Lens Policy Review Committee co-chairs to just present on their information and what they report on to the policyholder for all policies and thinking about that potential work. We also had our once a semester meeting with the chair and vice chair of the regents, Chair Powell and Vice Chair Sviggum, in a very productive hour-long discussion. We just got some legislative updates as we did in the Senate meeting earlier, so I won't belabor that. And in our FCC meeting right before this, we had a presentation on the state of faculty affairs from Rebecca Ropers and Keisha Varma, Vice Provosts. And I had a very nuanced and discussion of what's going on with faculty, how things are going, and some interesting thoughts and ideas for going forward, which I'll come back to in a second. We're aiming to, as the year ends up, to hear from the Benefits Advisory Committee leadership at one of our future FCC meetings. And then lastly, as we had the FCC Town Hall in February about how faculty are doing, there is a facilitated faculty design thinking forum in May. We're aiming for 40 to 60 faculty from a broad range of positions and colleges and campuses, and all tenure system faculty, contract clinical faculty, and again, P&A teaching research professionals. And that's for establishing ideas and priorities for shaping the future, what it means to be a faculty member at the U. We've asked our FCC chairs to ask for ideas for people, and then some of our associate deans for faculty affairs. And then we'll be reporting back to the broader Senate and probably on our updates and then next fall on that. And so that is the 8 items from my report. Back to you, President Gable.
Thank you. Item 6 is approval of the Twin Cities slate of candidates for the FCC. For this, I'm going to call on Professor Carol Chomsky to present this item. Carol?
Thank you. So I appreciate a couple of minutes just to talk about this item. The responsibility of the nominating subcommittee, FCC nominating subcommittee, is to create a ballot with exactly twice as many candidates as there are slots to fill. That's why you see 6 candidates, because there are 3 spots to fill this year. A word about the process we used this year, as we did last year. We put a call out to all eligible faculty, that is all tenured and tenure-track faculty, to recommend individuals for consideration for the ballot, recommending themselves or someone else. And both years we received a healthy response, and we really appreciate those who put up either their own names or other names. And I will say that those names carry on year to year because we have to do a ballot with only twice the number of positions, and there are 3 positions each year. There are often very worthy candidates who don't end up on the ballot. So those names carry on. And I suspect a call will be put out next year, and it'll just be a continuing collection. You will notice that, as has typically been true in FCC elections, the candidates are paired. And although there's a comment about this in the materials in the docket, I wanted to, sometimes it still comes as a surprise to people. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why they're paired, why we decided to pair this year, as has been decided in past years to pair. The reason is that as the result of the election, put together the new people elected with those who continue on FCC, the hope is to have a broad representation across the colleges at the university. Even though each FCC member represents the entire university, represents the faculty at the entire university, it's really useful to have voices from across the various general disciplines and colleges, and that's why the pairing is done. Candidates are therefore usually paired, as they are this year, either by college or by more general disciplinary areas. Science is in one grouping, for instance, and humanities in another. It's not a perfect system, but that's the goal. Again, the point was made in the docket comment, but I wanted to be sure that was understood. The other comment I'll make is about the election itself. And I'm going to ask for your assistance here. Once the ballot is approved, the election will be conducted electronically. Every eligible faculty member, tenure and tenure track faculty, get an email inviting them to vote. The ballot will contain the information you see here on the docket, Senate-related service by the candidates, supplemented by information about their college-related service, and by a statement from each candidate about themselves and the issues facing the university to help introduce them to their faculty colleagues who will be voting. Because I think of the great volume of communications we all receive in our U of M email accounts, the invitation to vote can easily get lost in the influx of messages. And I think also some faculty will look and say, well, I don't know any of these people, and they're busy, and that's entirely understandable, but they may not vote. And so what I ask you to do, I solicit your help as faculty senators in alerting in the Twin Cities, it's the Twin Cities delegation, in alerting your colleagues, your constituents to the existence and importance of the election. A note from you to them asking them to take the time to read the ballot and vote can go a long way to ensuring that those who are elected and are selected in a robust election process. So I ask for your help in doing that. And with that, it is up for approval as a ballot.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Chomsky. This vote is for Twin Cities and Duluth faculty senators only, and a simple majority is required to approve. So Chris, if you could please initiate the poll.
I'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 66 ayes, 3 nays, and 5 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Item 7 concerns revisions to the Faculty Senate bylaws to amend the charge of the Senate Committee on Educational Policy, or SCEP. This is the second meeting at which these revisions are being presented, so we just need a simple majority to approve. If you have any questions about that, I would refer you to the docket. There's some detail about that in there. So Chris, if you could please initiate the poll.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 62 ayes, 1 nay, and 14 abstentions, that motion does prevail.
Thank you. All right, the next item concerns revision to the Faculty Senate bylaws to amend the charge of the Faculty Consultative Committee. This motion requires half of all elected members of the Faculty Senate to vote aye for approval, meaning there need to be 82 aye votes. For that reason, abstentions are treated as negative votes in this instance. Given this threshold, we very much encourage our senators to participate in the vote. Ned, did you want to be recognized?
Yes, I did, and there needs to be a revision to this. It was discovered, and I don't think you'd had time to hear this morning, that there's a 10 days that proposed revisions need to be submitted, and it was noticed today there was an error in what was submitted. Everything that was added or the strikeout below was accurate, but under the charge of the committee, some parts were deleted that are not shown on the docket. So that's been a change. So we don't believe we can vote today. We had indicated that to Eddie DeVoe, the chair of the Senate Committee on Committee. She's not able to be here, but she indicated she'd withdraw the motion for a vote today. But we would like a discussion on it to help us guide a further vote in whether there'd be any possible slight revisions to it or not. And so if you could open it up and chair a discussion of this, any questions? And I think the reasoning is well explained in there. So I'd leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Ned. So this is not a vote. This is a discussion regarding, I'll read it one more time. The charge of the Faculty Consultative Committee. Is there any discussion? Okay, then we will give this to Eddie and look forward to a vote on this at a future meeting. The next item concerns approval of the Faculty Senate officers for next year. Professors Rachna Shah and Mitch Zamoff will be returning as clerk and parliamentarian respectively. We're happy to announce that Professor Kristen Hickman of the law school will be filling the role of Senate Vice Chair. We are ever so grateful to Professor Carol Chomsky, who carried the mace in my inauguration, someone who we look to with great respect and admiration and appreciation for her excellent service in all ways, but especially in this role over the past couple of years. So thank you, Carol. But in the meantime, is there any discussion? Okay, Chris, if you could please initiate the poll.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 72 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. Next item is approval of amendments to administrative policy on effort certification. Is there any discussion? Okay, Chris, please initiate the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 62 ayes, 0 nays, and 14 abstentions, that motion prevails.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 11 concerns old business. There is no old business. Item 12 concerns new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Okay, item 13 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Carl Flink makes the motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Carol, any discussion? All right, Chris, if you could initiate the poll.
Give 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 72 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 abstention, that motion prevails.
Okay, everyone, if we could just give Carol some virtual applause for her unbelievable service, for everything. Carol, thank you. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next time.